While there are ongoing rumblings within the federal coalition over committing to net zero by 2050, the New South Wales LNP Government are acting even sooner. The state government has announced it will cut its carbon emissions by 50% of its 2005 levels by 2030, up from the previous target of 35%. To discuss it all and the opportunities of a net zero future, I'm joined now by Sophia Hamblin, Wang, Chief Operations Officer of Carbonation International. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Dan.
Firstly, what do you make of the discussions that we've seen today from New South Wales?
It's certainly been a big day with regard to climate action and targets, and it's really great to see Matt Keane and Gladys Berejiklian committing to halving emissions reductions by 2030. It is a fantastic and ambitious target that is aligned with our global trading partners and our peers.
And they seem to have done what hasn't been possible in the Commonwealth, and that's an arrangement between the Liberals and the Nationals. What's your take on the politics we've seen after the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, returned from Washington, and then we immediately saw comments from the Nationals?
It's been really interesting because I think Minister Keane in particular, he identifies that there's a lot of opportunities to be taken advantage of when we look towards a net zero future. There are a number of jobs in the transition and the transformation of key parts of our economy that the first movers and the leaders in the field can be taking advantage of. I think that they were able to create a consensus with the Nationals on the real opportunities for regional activation and the ways that low emissions technologies will provide real opportunities for regional centres.
Is there a risk that the federal government is missing those key opportunities by this constant conversation about whether we are going to be doing things or not?
It would be really nice if the federal government were to have a more proactive and ambitious climate target, particularly net zero by 2050, but also ambitious interim targets. But I think if you have a finger on the pulse of what's being postured within the federal government, you'd see that Josh Frydenberg this week has released a statement saying that Australia can't risk being seen as climate pariahs with our trading partners, and that if we don't have ambitious climate targets aligned with them, then we'll find it difficult to access global finance, and we'll have other financial consequences. So it is really going to impact our competitiveness in regard to the way that we interact with our trading partners. So the federal government's treasurer, who gets the best advice from economists, from insurance companies, from the business world, from the brightest minds, is signalling that we can't risk being left behind with regard to climate ambition. I think that we can probably see that the government will likely commit to a net zero by 2050 target before COP, likely in the middle of October.
Big call. We're watching that one for sure. Often this conversation gets distilled down to winners and losers as though it's a binary like that. And so often the losers are portrayed as those in the pastoral sector. But as I was hearing yesterday from Gabby Chan, a journalist who's just written a book about this very topic, she says that there are lots of pastoralists that are already well ahead of this, that are looking at carbon capture and storage and have been doing so for some years.
There are so many opportunities with being proactive with regard to emissions reductions technologies. In the agriculture and land care sector in particular, there are a lot of opportunities, but also creating low emissions steel and cement and aluminium. These are all opportunities for Australia to create really great new green products within our own borders, but also that strengthens our exports as well.
And for anyone who's not familiar, when you talk about those opportunities, that's exactly the world you're living in with Carbonation International. What is it that you do?
Yeah, so I work with a company that's developing carbon capture and utilization technology, and that's really in a circular carbon economy play. We take emissions from the hard to abate sectors like the steel and cement and chemicals sectors, and we transform those emissions into building materials like cements and plasterboards and solid materials. I've got one with me here. So this plasterboard, this was emissions from an ammonium nitrate factory just a month ago. So we turn emissions into new products that can be sold for profit.
That's incredible. Can you give us a sense of how you turn that from emissions a month ago into a solid building block that you're holding now?
So the Earth naturally stores CO2 over millions of years in a process called weathering. And we've taken that process from millions of years on a geological timescale into a matter of minutes in our pilot plant in Newcastle. Now, that process it's much quicker, and then we bind the CO2 into solid products and work with global companies on creating markets that will buy them and adopt them into the circular carbon economy.
So if I was building a new house or doing a renovation, could I get products that are made from carbon to use in the house?
Yes, you can, but not right now. In that we're running a pilot plant right now, and our company has just received a $14.6 million grant from the federal government to scale up our technology into demonstrator, which is where we will be producing many thousands of tons of products every year. But that's the key, is that all of these technologies that have low emissions potential and also business model potential, they take time and investment in order to develop and scale. And government funding and grants, and also funding from the finance industry, can really help to de-risk that. So we're looking at around 3 to 5 years before we'll have products that will be able to be bought for the architect or for the consumer market. But that's I think that we may even be able to accelerate that with additional investment.
Yeah, well, fascinating times ahead. Thanks for joining me, Chief Operations Officer of Mineral Carbonation International, Sophia Hamblin Wang. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me, Dan.